Snow drifted like pale ash over the prairie, swallowing sound, save for the scream that cut sharp against the wind. Boone Callahan reined his horse at the railway cut, breath turning to steam beneath the brim of his hat. The giant rancher's eyes narrowed. He had known hunger and he had known grief, but never had a cry stopped him as this one did, thin, desperate, trembling with more than fear. He dismounted, boots sinking deep into frozen ballast, and the lantern's glow showed the truth: a woman swollen with child bound cruelly to the steel, her wrists raw against rope, and beside her, a little girl gagged, her cheeks streaked with frozen tears. The wind drove snow against their faces like knives. Boone knelt, his bulk shadowing them, and without a word drew his knife. Steel bit rope until the fibers sang apart. The woman gasped, clutching her daughter to her chest. Boone said nothing. He simply gathered them in his arms and lifted them clear of the track. The rail thrummed under his boots, a train far yet but coming. Her name was Eliza May Harlow, 25, widow, belly round with the weight of a child not yet born. The girl, Rosie, no more than 7, held her mother's skirts as though they might vanish into the storm. Eliza's eyes darted, shame and terror both there, as if salvation itself were dangerous to trust. Boone asked no questions. He threw his greatcoat over them and led the way to his horse. The animal shifted uneasily, sensing more than snow in the air. With effort, Boone set them both on the saddle before climbing up behind, his frame shielding them against the cold. The woman whispered something, "Thank you maybe, or don't let him find us," but the wind swallowed it. Boone only leaned forward, urging the horse toward his ranch. The fire at his cabin had nearly gone out, but soon it burned bright, filling the rough-hewn room with warmth and the smell of smoke. Eliza sat near the hearth, coat around her shoulders, Rosie curled against her side. Boone brought bread and coffee, and though his voice was low, his silence carried weight. Eat, rest, breathe. Eliza's fingers shook as she broke bread for her child. Shame hung about her like smoke. Shame not of what she'd done, but of what had been done to her. It spilled out at last, words stumbling into the firelight. Her husband had died in debt, crushed by a falling beam in the lumberyard. Sheriff Cormac Doyle had come to her doorstep with a ledger in one hand and a leer in the other, declaring the widow and her unborn child as payment owed. She had refused. She had told him no. For that, he had tied her to the iron track with the whole town watching, a lesson in obedience, a warning dressed as law. No one moved to help her. Not one hand reached for a knife, until Boone. Boone listened, jaw tight, a muscle working beneath the stubble of his cheek. His silence was not empty. It was a fortress. Eliza mistook it for judgment at first, lowering her eyes, cheeks burning. But Rosie, sharp-eyed for a child, crept closer to Boone, pressing her small fingers against his calloused hand. The rancher looked down, startled. He didn't pull away. Instead, he shifted, letting her hand stay there, a silent promise that no harm would come while he drew breath. The next day, the whispers began. Boone hitched his wagon and took Eliza into town to fetch medicine. Faces turned. Martha Granger, the widow who carried every story as if it were gospel, clicked her tongue loud enough to cut the air. "A man takes in another man's widow," she said to no one and everyone, "and the unborn with her. That's not charity, it's foolishness." Eliza flushed scarlet, head bowed. Boone said nothing. He walked her through the street with his hat low, his bulk clearing a path through gossip like a plow through snow. Yet silence is not absence, and every gesture Boone made was deliberate. He left wood stacked higher than needed at her fire. He took Rosie to feed the horses, showing her how to hold a palm flat so teeth wouldn't nip. When Eliza shivered in her sleep, she woke to his coat draped over her, still warm from his shoulders. He never asked for thanks. He never asked for anything. But winter has long memory, and men like Doyle thrive on fear. He came riding to Boone's ranch one dusk, spurs jingling, his deputies flanking him like shadows. He sat tall in his saddle, mouth curved in a sneer. "You think she's yours now, Callahan? You think you can steal what belongs to the law?" His voice carried the arrogance of a man who'd never been told no and made it stick. Boone stood on his porch, rifle cradled loose but ready in his arms. He didn't raise it. He didn't speak. He simply stared, steady as stone, his sighs filling the doorway. Eliza watched from the window, her hand trembling over her swollen belly. The sheriff's grin faltered under that silence, under the unmovable weight of a man who would not bend. At last Doyle spat in the snow, turned his horse, and left with words that hung like frost, "This ain't finished." For a time, it seemed finished. Days passed, quiet but tense. Then one night, as the wind howled and the cabin door rattled on its hinges, Rosie was gone. The bed was empty, the blanket cold. Panic gripped Eliza like iron. She screamed her daughter's name into the storm until her throat broke raw. Boone was already in the saddle, lantern swinging. Tracks in the snow, small and stumbling, led back toward the railway. He found them by the rails again, Sheriff Doyle's torch casting cruel shadows. Rosie bound to the track alone, the sheriff waiting with pistol drawn, a trap set neat as a snare. "Step closer, Callahan," Doyle jeered, "and watch what happens when a man meddles in another's debt." The train's whistle keened in the distance, mournful and near. Boone dismounted without haste, his greatcoat flapping like wings in the wind. Doyle raised his gun, but Boone moved with the power of a storm breaking trees. One stride, too, his hand clamping Doyle's wrist, wrenching it until bone cracked and the pistol fell into the snow. With his other hand, Boone drove the sheriff's face against the rail, pressing him down until the iron sang with the oncoming train. "Hear it," Boone's voice was gravel, spoken low for Doyle's ear alone. "That's fear. That's what you gave her." The sheriff choked, boots scrabbling, pride bleeding out into the snow. Boone dragged him clear only when the rails screamed and the headlight burned across the cut. The train roared by, shaking earth and sky, drowning Doyle's whimpers beneath its thunder. When it passed, the sheriff lay broken, not by bullet but by humiliation, the kind a man like him could never survive. Boone cut Rosie free and lifted her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest, sobbing. Eliza stumbled through the snow to meet them, falling to her knees as her daughter was returned. She wept, not from weakness but from the release of a terror too long carried. Boone laid his coat around her shoulders once more. Snow fell quiet, soft as forgiveness. The townsfolk came soon after, drawn by the whistle and the rumor of Doyle's fall. They saw the sheriff sprawled in the snow, saw Boone towering over him without pride or gloating, only the grave steadiness of a man who did what was needed. And in their silence, something shifted. Fear had lost its teeth. Eliza lifted her face, tear-streaked and luminous in the torchlight. Boone met her gaze and said nothing, but his silence spoke what words never could: "You are safe, you are seen, you are no one's shame." Later, when the town would whisper of that night, some would say Boone broke the sheriff. Others would say Eliza found her dignity again. The truth was simpler, quieter, stronger. On a frozen night by the tracks, a man chose mercy over fear, and in the space that mercy carved, love, unspoken, steadfast, took root. And if you listen close, you might still hear it whispered in the snow: "No chain, no law, no cruel hand can bind the soul that refuses to bow." Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.